Hey guys, 2 important indicators of a healthy metabolism or lack thereof. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 tips on how to see how your metabolism is running. Is it running like a Ferrari, or is it kind of an old jalopy, like that old Columbo car that he used to drive and talk about? So here we go. Many times as we age, 45 and older, we start to gain weight. We start to not feel well. My mother-in-law used to call it patch after a certain age. And the weight gain comes in, the fluff, the joint pain. You're not as energetic, and you want to know, how is your metabolism actually running? You want a little bit of a window into any red flags or yellow flags on the field to let you know that a correction might be needed. That might be a correction in exercise. That might be starting intermittent fasting. That might be a nutritional shift. You may not be able to handle the same kind of food that you used to eat. So 2 things that you want to look at, really, really important. These are the first 2 things to look at. The first one is easy and free. The second one is going to require a doctor. We love doctors. Speaking of doctors, I am not a doctor. I do not give medical advice here. I do not tell anybody to be off their medications or on their medications or don't take your medications or supplements or anything else. So always check with your doctor if you're going to take I'm not going to call it advice. This is for educational purposes only. But if you are going to start to dig in or start to implement any of the things that I talk about on my YouTube channel, really, really important to check with your doctor first. Okay, here we go. The first thing is, do you get hangry? Now, I know that in the world of social media, there's a lot of memes and jokes about this, but actually hangry, or as someone else in the health and wellness space calls hypoglycemia, I'm going to give him credit for that. It's Dave Asprey. He came up with the term, not me. Hypoglycemia or hangry, shaky, they used to call it hypoglycemic. If you start to feel like low blood sugar, that could be an indicator that your metabolism is not functioning. You should be able to not eat for several hours after a meal, after a full meal. You've eaten breakfast. You've eaten your whatever it is for breakfast. I'm not going to get into that. You can watch some of my other videos for that. I can actually put a video. At the end of this video, there will be a link or hook or photo or something. I think it's called an end card. There'll be an end card that you can click on that I talk about what are the best breakfasts. I'm not going to do it in this video, but in another video, I will be talking about what's going to set you up for success for breakfast. But let's go back to metabolism. So one of the best ways to know how your metabolism is working is if you are a person that gets hangry. No, it's not genetic. It is that your body is not able to go for several hours without food. We were designed as humans to go for a long time without food because we have something called adipose tissue, commonly known as fat. That is there to be used as fuel, as energy. You should be able to switch over easily when you're not eating and use your fat as fuel. Going to quote another one of my people that I love, I'm not going to call him a mentor, but someone that I love, which is Dr. Mark Hyman, uses the term all the time. Your fat is there to be used as fuel, not to hold up your pants. So that's what it's there for. It's there to be used as fuel. And if you're not using it as fuel, you know that because you become hangry very easily, or you say to yourself, I have to eat every 2 hours. That is not a thing, and that is not raising your metabolism. That is just an indicator that you are a sugar burner. And if you're just a sugar burner, you get hangry. So sugar burners, they just deplete their glucose in their blood, and then they, get headaches, get hangry, get moody. Their mood changes because your brain is changing. Your brain is asking for more glucose. Yes, we use glucose as energy, and it's a good thing to people. Kind of, if you're listening to a lot of these things, on Instagram or on YouTube, you might get the impression that you're not supposed to be a sugar burner. You are. It's our body's first use of energy is just to go to that sugar, and that's fine. But when you're done with that, your body should switch over. It's kind of like I'm going to give myself credit for this. I came up with the hybrid car idea where you want to be able to switch over from the gas. When you run out of gas in the middle of the desert, you want to be able to switch over to that electric car or that battery. And if you're not doing that, your car gets mad at you and will give you a headache, nausea. You'll have all kinds of symptoms, those hangry, moody, and your mood will change. And a great indicator that your metabolism might be sputtering is if you're the person that gets hangry. So you want to take a look at your breakfast, your food, how you're eating. Maybe it's too carb heavy. We were definitely lied to about the food pyramid that we need to be eating all these grains. You really don't need to be doing that, especially after 45. I mostly talk to my ladies here that are over 45 and struggling a little bit with their health and weight gain and autoimmune. But this really applies to anybody. You really don't need to have whatever. I haven't looked at the latest food pyramid. Maybe we can put it up here and show people what the latest food pyramid is. But I'm not a believer in the food pyramid. It's a scam. Just my opinion. Okay, that was free, just to kind of look at what you're eating and watch some of my other videos. And you definitely want to take a look at that. Like, look at yourself in the mirror. Take a good look in the mirror if you're that person that I just described. Okay, number 2 is blood work. So there are 3 numbers that you want to know. 2 of them, or one, they kind of do standard. The second one, if you're gaining weight and after 45 is standard. And the third one, they not only don't do, but they will argue with you about doing it. They meaning the doctors, who I love, but they are not routinely doing this. And it's not an expensive blood work test, but it will tell you a lot about your metabolism and how it's working. It'll tell you enough. I should say it'll tell you a lot, yes, but it'll also tell you enough to get started. Obviously, you want to do other deeper tests, which they do, cholesterol, lipid panel, all that stuff, liver function. Those are super, super important. But just checking your metabolism, there are 3 tests that you want to have as a baseline, no matter what age you are, actually. Because then when you start to move into 45, 50 and over, and your metabolism struggles a little bit, especially for my women who are losing their estrogen, you definitely want to know these numbers where you started. So the first one is fasting blood sugar. So as you know, you've seen that. Everyone watching here probably has, if you go back to your blood work, you will see a fasting. If your doctor has asked you cholesterol, often they ask you to do it fasting. So fasting blood sugar is going to tell you what your level of blood sugar. So it's kind of the glucose that's around that, just simplified version of this. Like everyone's got glucose that kind of hangs around that red blood cell. That's going to tell you what that moment in time is. So that's a really important part of this. It's a moment in time. So it changes momentarily, hourly. The fasting. So even throughout your morning, lots of things influence blood sugar, like current blood sugar. It's a current number and it's always moving, your blood sugar. So that fasting blood sugar is a really important number to know, and know where you are when you wake up in the morning generally and you get your day going, and what does that blood sugar look like when you're not eating, and what that number is. Really important number. And I'm going to put up a chart here as well. Look at this chart where it's like there's normal numbers that people think are normal, that their doctor might say is normal, and that's really not normal. So normal blood sugar, fasting blood sugar numbers should be in the 70, 75 maximum. Once it's in the 90 to 95, that's an indicator probably that it's going up. That's why I usually tell people to, no matter what age you are, know your fasting blood sugar. Even if you're 30, you want to know your fasting blood sugar because it's going to fluctuate as you age, and it's going to become harder and harder to manage the blood sugar as you, just what happens. So especially if you're somebody who, like me, who was vegan or vegetarian, that's going to adversely affect the blood sugar because you're putting in a whole lot of carbs. I was basically a pastatarian when I was in my 20s because I didn't know how to cook. And I was just, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you're just eating pasta. So that is what I would say is that fasting blood sugar. Okay. Blood work number 2 is going to be your A1C. Now this they will do, after 45, or if you've gained a lot of weight, or if you're, 15 or more more pounds, they might do that as a routine just to be able to tell you that you're pre-diabetic or where your blood sugar numbers are. And what does the A1C tell you? The A1C, it's called hemoglobin A1C, and it tells you sort of like a batting average. Like if you're thinking about baseball, I do a lot of baseball analogies. I'm a baseball fan. So it's kind of like your batting average of the past 2 to 3 months of what your blood sugar is. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's your average of your fasting blood sugar. It's your overall average. So after you eat, your blood sugar goes up because you've given your body a lot of fuel, a lot of glucose to use as energy. So it's going to be a number, and that's not going to be reflective of that blood sugar number, which is going to be in the 70s, 80s, 90s, hopefully not over 100. But the A1C is going to be in a different way of presenting it to you, which is that 5 points. It's usually like 4 point something or 5 point something. If it's over, and you can, look at the graph, if it's over 5.7, I think. Now the lab set the reference ranges. So the reference ranges can vary, but I'm just giving you approximate numbers. If it's 5.7 or above, they usually call that pre-diabetic. So if you're anything above 5.7 there, and you might be thin and you don't have weight to lose, and your blood sugar average A1C could still go up. If you've been told you're pre-diabetic, your fasting blood sugar is probably in the 90s, which is what they told you was okay and normal. But if you're pre-diabetic, your average blood sugar is too high. So you definitely want to take a look at that and change some of the things you're doing. You could change your exercise. You could do a lower carb diet, certainly cut out sugar. That's that A1C number. And once that's kind of in the pre-diabetic area, that's an indicator that it's moving in the wrong direction. And that's what we kind of always look at is it moving in the wrong direction? And you don't want that as you age, because especially women, the estrogen is one of the things that helps you manage the blood sugar. So you want to have a handle on that before that A1C, that hemoglobin A1C, is in the 6s. Once it's in the 6s, 7s, 8s, I've seen it that high. Definitely is that high for anybody who's like obese, if you're in the obese category. I'm also going to tell you at the end of the video about BMI and not to look at BMI. That is a very simplified and old and out of date version of looking at your metabolism and your health and all that stuff. So we'll get to BMI because I know everyone kind of knows about BMI. So that's hemoglobin A1C. Okay, third number, and most of you guys listening to this probably have never heard of this number, and your doctor probably has never, unless you've been to an endocrinologist, even like drawn blood for this number. And so you need to ask for it. That's my point here. You need to ask for this. This is going to tell you a lot about how you're burning sugar or fat or what's happening with your metabolism. There's my dog there. Okay, so this number, here we go. You ready for it? Fasting insulin. Fasting insulin. Okay, 2 things about fasting insulin are that it's also a moment in time. So it's a hormone. Insulin is a hormone, which you may know. But when they test that, it's a moment in time. So it's another number that's fluid and moves all the time. So you want to get a baseline. Again, however old you are, you want to have a baseline of that fasting insulin number, because that's going to tell you kind of where you started. So if you're listening to this again and you're 30 or 40 and you don't have weight to lose, next time you go to the doctor, just get that fasting insulin number. If you have to pay for it, I've seen it anywhere in a range from $15 to, $50 to $75 at the most. You could even order it yourself. There are so many great companies out there that will allow you to do that. But just know a couple things to know about fasting insulin. It's a moment in time. This is what it's checking, or this is what it's showing you or presenting to you, is it's giving you information about how much insulin is being pumped out of your pancreas. Now, insulin's a hormone that has a few different jobs. It's been called, and this is kind of just a simplified way of looking at it, it's been called the fat storage hormone, because it's giving an indication to your body when food comes in, whether you're going to be using it, as fuel, like the food. Are you using the glucose or whatever as fuel, or are we storing it as fat in your adipose tissue? So it's really important. And it's one of those hormones that can get out of whack, or too high, by the way. It can get too high before you see it on your fasting blood sugar or your A1C. So that's why they don't do it, is because the standard right now is just to check your fasting blood sugar and to check your A1C. So those things are easy to tell your doctor, yeah, and most people know about those two, blood tests. The fasting insulin, and I hope you're writing this down because I really want you to get the fasting insulin, is a number that's going to be anywhere from like 2 to like in the 20s. Now, the reference ranges on these are also kind of crazy because I think anything above 6, and when I say I think, it's because I've dug into some research and listened to the experts in the field, Dr. Ben Bickman being one of them. I could name a lot of them, but listen to his talk. He's an insulin expert out of University of Utah, if you want to look him up. And a lot of people in the field that know about this say that 6 is really the maximum that you want to be, even though the reference ranges are in the 20s. So because when you're in the 6 to 10, before you get into the teens on that number, it's really easily reversible. It takes some time, but it is easily reversible. And that's how you reverse diabetes. And that's how you get out of that pre-diabetic phase. So you want to know that number, because when you go and get your A1C and your doctor says, oh, you're pre-diabetic, let's watch it. That's my favorite line. Let's watch it. What does that mean? That's not an action plan. What does that mean? So watching it, let's watch it go in the wrong direction. What are we watching? So when you see that fasting insulin number, and that one is also above 6, between 6 and like 13, 13 is a little high, but like 6 and 10, let's just say, you can make some serious changes, exercise, nutrition, going down on carbs and sugar, please. That will make a huge difference, but it takes time to move that number. So what that number is checking is how much insulin is being pumped out of that pancreas in order to bring the blood sugar down in homeostasis, because your body wants to be, no matter what system we're talking about, in homeostasis. I'm not going to get too sciencey, but I am going to tell you that insulin is an awesome, incredible, our bodies are incredible. It's an incredible hormone that keeps your blood sugar balanced. If your blood sugar is way too high, you could die. If it's way too low, you probably know this part, you could die also. So that insulin is really helping you. So what it's going to do is you eat a huge meal filled with carbs and sugar and overeat, and you got all kinds of glucose coming in. Your bloodstream cannot handle all of that glucose. It has to get rid of it, get it out of the bloodstream. And that's what insulin does. It gets it out of the bloodstream, but it's got to go somewhere. So it goes to muscles, it goes to fats, your fat tissue, your adipose tissue. It goes all over the place, hopefully not to the liver, but it goes to places that need it, possibly for energy. Now, if you don't have a lot of muscle, it's going to go in your fat cells, right? And that's how we get fat or gain weight, in the wrong places. So it has to go somewhere. And that's what insulin's doing. It's one of the things it's doing is telling all that extra glucose where to go. Now, if you were to have a normal meal with low carb, low sugar, protein, healthy fats, and your blood sugar didn't spike, your pancreas doesn't need much of a job because it's going to shoot out some insulin. And you're going to go, okay, we're good. We're just raising blood sugar a little bit here and we got a little extra. So I'm going to go for a walk afterwards and use that energy. Big meal, sitting around, going right to bed after a big meal. The glucose has nowhere to go. Insulin is super busy. There's no more muscle space to go. So when that doesn't have anywhere to go, it goes right to the adipose tissue. So that's insulin's job, is to indicate to your body. It's sort of the traffic cop. It's telling where to go. If you're not building muscle, if you don't have a place for it to go, it's got nowhere else to go but the fat cells, and that's how we gain weight. So that fasting insulin number is an indicator, because if it's too high, that means your meals are so high that your insulin is constantly, so if you're eating constantly high carb, high sugar, ice cream, like all the stuff that all the things, all the stuff that you shouldn't be doing. And so your pancreas stays ready and is just constantly pumping out a bunch of insulin so that it's ready. It's got ready for that huge meal that's coming, and it gets kind of used to the huge meal. Now, a huge meal once in a while, or if you're 25-year-old guy, you just pump it out and then your body's like, okay, we're going to wait and see what happens with the next meal. But if you have 20 years, this number takes a long time to be super high all the time. So you're training your pancreas in your early years, in your 20s and 30s and 40s. You're training your pancreas about how much insulin you need to be pumped out. And by the time you get to be 45, 55, if you've have 25, 35 years of high carby, high sugar, overindulgence meals, then when you get to that age, that's how it takes years to, build up to a fasting insulin of 16. Then that's why, to right the ship, to turn that Titanic, to right it, it takes some work. So we don't want to get you to that point. That's why I want younger people who are listening to this to get those numbers so that you have a baseline so you know where you're going and you can catch it really quickly. Because when you're younger, it's much easier to right that ship. As we age 55 and over and your fasting insulin is super high, it's just harder to fix that. So those are my top 2 tips. Call to action here is get the blood work, and also subscribe if you like this video, and watch my next video on blood sugar and how to look at the numbers and how to right the ship. I'm going to talk about exercise in that video, and triglycerides is another number. And doctors are pretty good about indicating that your triglycerides are too high. That's a little bit of a teaser. So watch my next video on exercise and blood sugar. I've got some hacks on how to improve blood sugar if you get those numbers back and they're not good, and how to fix that for free. It's easy hacks that you can do to fix those numbers and fix your metabolism, really. Thanks, guys.